world.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here, man.
I've gotten to know you over the past year or two.
Yeah.
And you've got a phenomenal story. Tell a little bit about your story, where you came from, what your career was like, what's it like being a Top Gun pilot, that sort of thing.
Yeah, a little background. So I failed kindergarten. That's the first thing that you should know. So I knew from the very beginning that I wasn't going to operate on intellect alone. But, you know, I learned how to be successful after that. Actually did graduate from kindergarten, went on to graduate from college. And then I went into the Marines, almost as a whim, actually. I went into the Marine Corps, ended up being top of my class in the Marines, top in flight school, top of my next layer in flight school, and next thing you know, I'm flying F-18s, which were, at that time, I think the baddest airplane on the planet. Did that for 3 years, started out as the worst, just like my kindergarten experience, I started out as the worst pilot that had shown up at that squadron. And in 3 years, I was off teaching at our weapons school, having graduated from Top Gun, teaching at our weapons school, and I did it based on the principle of small incremental changes and learning how to fly an airplane with precise measurements and changes. And so did that for years, fought in combat. I was out in Iraq twice. I went to South Korea several times, was influential in planning actually for that potential war there, and have had a blast ever since then.
That's great. Well, you've got a book, 21 Day Miracle. What's the premise behind 21? I mean, your name is Ed Rush. It seems like you do everything fast.
It's not even a made-up name. It was really literally the one given to me by my parents. Speed is my thing, and about everything I do, and that comes into conflict every once in a while when I'm on the road. That's a problem. I had 3 kids in 3.5 years, so that was like also one of those speed things. But in general, my belief system is why take 10 years to do something that you can do in 10 minutes, and so. I've really built a business teaching people how to accomplish things fairly quickly and absolutely to compress time. And so as entrepreneurs, which I know you are, we've been told a lie. And the lie is the one that you hear where people go, I mean, if I was to give you, for example, if I was to put an F-18 next to a Tonka truck and ask you which one goes faster, you'd pick the F-18. If I put a Corvette next to a Pinto, you'd say the Corvette goes faster. We've been told this lie that, the tortoise always wins and slow and steady wins the race. But the truth is, the rabbit actually always wins. If you put a real rabbit in real life next to a real turtle and let them go, the rabbit wins every single time. And so we've been told this lie by these folks who are like, slow and steady wins the race and persistence creates champions. And it's just not true. The best entrepreneurs I know, and I've worked with thousands, literally, of some of the best and brightest minds in the world leader types, folks who are big in industry. The best and most successful people I know are the ones who run their life by what I call strategic sprints. They have a goal, and they create an objective, and they do a fast move to get there. And when you create your life around a series of strategic sprints, you end up accomplishing amazing things in a short period of time.
Well, you've got a background in national security.
Yep.
You've helped protect our nation for a long time. You've got an awareness of all of the hot spots and the things. What are the top national security risks you see today?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I think you're doing an amazing job talking about the cyber risk. And I'll just tell you parenthetically, I didn't understand that. Even as a military person, we talked about that a lot. I didn't understand that cyber economic threat quite the way I did until I read Secret Weapon and understood what you teach. But from a military perspective, we really have 2 fronts. Now, we have more places that we're involved in nationally, but we really have a front in the Middle East, and then we have a front in Asia, really North Korea, kind of China. And so those 2 areas I'm quite familiar with because I fought in Iraq and was on the ground there and actually saw the situation on the ground. And then I was one of the people who planned the operation plan for a potential war against North Korea. And so it's interesting when you look at those 2 places because from a military perspective, they couldn't be more polar opposites. What you have in North Korea is a very traditional north-south front war. And Marines, like I was, Marines, Army soldiers, Navy sailors, Air Force airmen, we're from the very beginning taught in the military to do one thing well. And really, that's it. We were taught how to hit a target. From the very first day in boot camp. I mean, your whole entire goal in life is to hit the target. You're taught in boot camp while someone's screaming over your shoulder how to operate an M16 weapon. And then you're taught over and over and over again. And the Marines are amazing at this. I mean, we take these 17, 18-year-old kids from the middle of Nebraska, who haven't seen like another state. And all of a sudden, within 5 weeks, they are lethal, steely-eyed killers. And we're really good at hitting targets. And same in the F-18. I spent years really just training effectively to hit a target. In North Korea, that is a target-centric war. It's one that we as military warfighters completely understand. You've got the North and the South. You've got the bad guys and the good guys. You've got a line in between them, which is something that we like on military maps. Sure. We go north, they go south. Whoever goes farthest in one direction wins. And it's a very understandable basic war. Incredibly winnable war, by the way. Our air forces, combined with the South Korean forces, are no match, I will just tell you, for what North Korea has. It's a very short war. The Middle East is a completely separate environment. I mean, the media barely talks about it, but part of the reason they don't talk about it is confusing. There's 11, 12, 13, 15 players on the ground in Syria, and it changes every single day. The alignments and who's aligned with who changes, and so it's more like the show Game of Thrones, where like you're not even sure who's in charge or what's going to happen next. And that, frankly, makes it very difficult for the warfighter, people like me, to be able to execute well there, because on any given day, the bad guy changes, and any given day, the rules of engagement begin to change. So you've got two completely separate engagements.
Well, given that, and we're seeing changes all around the world all the time. Recently, we've seen the failure in Venezuela,
Yeah.
And we're about to see, I think, a failure in Iran, economically. Can you comment on those?
Yeah, I mean, so you've got, first of all, the commonality between both of them, and I just read the email that you just recently sent out about this, is brilliant. Is they're both socialist, or at the very least totalitarian, communist socialist kind of governments. And anytime you force people to do things, it just doesn't end up working right. And so fundamentally, from an economic perspective, you will never see this on CNN. In fact, they don't even talk about Venezuela, which is actually crazy to me. You've got both of those. Now, from a military perspective, Iran is an incredibly strategic place. Incredibly strategic place for us. The thing that most folks don't recognize about Iran when we're talking about them nationally is they're not an Arab country. We a lot of times lump a lot of the Muslim countries together, but they're Persians. Right. Persians think completely different than Arabs, and I'm not saying good or bad, but Persians think more like we do, actually. It's very interesting the way alignments begin to work. And, you know, we used to have an ally in Iran, a very strategic ally right there in the Middle East, which obviously that completely changed. I mean, they're still flying F-14s in Iran right now. They're still flying our airplanes that we sold them in Iran right now. Now, just so you know, the F-14 is not any match for the F-18 currently, but you know, it used to be quite a good airplane. And so you have a country that I believe is an incredibly strategic center right in the middle of the Middle East. And I believe actually strategically it will be important. We're not aligned. Our governments obviously clearly are not aligned for a lot of good reasons. And some bad reasons, by the way, but that nation, I believe, has a future which will turn. My feeling is within the next 10 years, Iran will actually completely turn, not with their current government, but through their own revolution, will turn and actually become our ally. They're incredibly strategic to us, I believe, and they're incredibly strategic to Israel as well.
I was in Egypt recently and in Cairo talking with their government and watching the massive changes that have taken place. So Egypt has actually become very friendly to Israel.
Yep.
And yet there was a war fought between the two of them in our lifetime.
I know.
And we've seen that massive change. It'd be amazing if Iran shifted in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, Iran historically, so, you know, we're here in the United States coming up on 250 years, you know, kind of being around. And Iran goes back at least 4,000 years, you know. And so there's deep cultural history there. And the thing that we as Americans sometimes miss is the long trajectory of history. You have in Iran a history, when you speak specifically of Israel, you have a king whose name was Cyrus, who actually was prophesied by hundreds of years ahead of time by the prophet Isaiah, who said, this king will actually be raised up by me, and he will be a light to you and be able to unlock treasures from darkness. And really that king raised up, and for no other reason than just God told him to. He's a blessing to Israel. He kind of let them go back into their land for no purpose of gain at all. And the seeds of a king like that, actually I believe, are still planted in a place like that. I think the deep heritage and history, and when you talk to Persians, they recognize their deep history, and they recognize their place in the world, and they recognize the deviation that their current regime has from that. So I think there's a future for that country.
Speaking of another country that goes back thousands of years, talk about China.
Yeah.
Talk about what I believe we've been in an economic war with China for quite some time.
Yeah.
Only recently in the Wall Street Journal, there was an article that said the business community is finally beginning to recognize that. They
Yep.
saw China as a potential for profit. Now they realize it's a threat. Do you have any comments, any thoughts on China from?
Yeah, I mean, so from a military perspective, take China. Just look at their air forces. China has about 4,000 fighter airplanes. 4,000. Just trounces us significantly. I mean, they've got 1,500 almost MiG-21 airplanes, and so if we ended up in a war with China, which by the way, I don't think we're going to end up. I think we're in a war with China economically, like you've been so good at describing. I think China is actually smart enough to know how to beat us, and it's not militarily. I think they know how to beat us because we have an open, very free economy that lets businesses move back and forth. And I think, as you've very accurately discussed, they know how to beat us on an economic cyber front. They're a gigantic threat. Of course they are. I mean, they really, between China and Russia, have absolutely no desire to keep their money tied up in a petrodollar that's based on our dollar. They're not thrilled with us as far as our national policy. And so they're a threat. I don't think, like I said, I don't think they're military. They are a military threat if we went to war with them because it would be a big war. I don't think we're going to go to war with them. I think we're going to go to economic war with them. And if we end up in North Korea, they will be the lever that shifts that particular war. So North Korea, which we were just talking about, is about a week of a war if we did it. If it's just South Korea and the United States against North Korea, it's over in a week. If China enters, it's a completely different game. And so they really become the wild card in North Korea when it comes down to it. But they're definitely the wild card in the economic war, for sure.
One of the arguments people make is that you see Trump went to North Korea. It would take, as it took Nixon to go to China,
Yeah.
it would take Trump to go to North Korea. And there is conjecture that he is devising a wedge between China and North Korea. And there is also conjecture that he may be devising a wedge between Russia and China, because North Korea really has more to fear from China than they do from the United States.
Yeah.
Russia should fear China more than the United States. Any comment? We think this may be the new Trump doctrine. If it's not the Trump doctrine, I think it should be.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I wouldn't put it past the administration to be creating those things. Of course, the media isn't willing to talk about any of that, other than the negative. What business angle is he working, or something like that. So, but I wouldn't put it past them to be able to do that. I mean, you really have three completely separate entities in North Korea, China, and Russia. You throw Iran in there too, by the way, in that sort of quad mix there. And Iran's an interesting scenario because you have, like I was talking about the Middle East. I'll go there and we'll come back. In Iran, you have so on the take Syria. For the most part, we align with Iran on most of the allied organizations in Syria, which is kind of interesting. Russia is 100% aligned with Iran, and we're not, right? And so you look at Russia being aligned with Iran. We're not aligned with Iran, but Iran's aligned with just about everybody that we're aligned with on the ground. When you look at those three countries, North Korea, China, and Russia, you actually see similar alignments. So there's some alignment, and then there's some complete disalignment, And so you have in Russia, actually a huge country geographically, but a very small country as far as population and even economy goes, but incredibly large when it comes to military. And the Russian military arm reaches into almost all the other countries with supplies and airplanes. And so just about every single one of our enemies flies Russian-made airplanes. And if they don't fly Russian-made airplanes, they've reverse-engineered Russian-made airplanes. So, for example, the Chinese FT-7 is a carbon copy of the Russian MiG-21. So Chinese-made airplanes actually look exactly like Russian-made airplanes because the Chinese, much like they do with our technology, they buy them, and they take them apart, and then they go, hey, we know how to do this, and they put it all back together. And sometimes that works well, and sometimes it doesn't. There are some funny stories about Chinese-made airplanes that just didn't come to pass because of their inability to put things together. And so you have an alignment in certain cases, and then you have a complete breakdown in certain cases. So yeah, if you can break those groups up, so for example, take for example the petrodollar. If you can break the two of them up, it makes it more difficult for them to economically fight against us when it comes to the dollar, and it certainly is the exact same case when it comes to the military side.
If you could be made king for a day,
yeah,
what would you do?
Wow.
What changes would you make?
Only a day?
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping for 8 years, but I'll go for a day. All right. So, wow, a day. Let me think about what exactly I would do if I had it in a day. All right. So I would go on a deregulation spree. If I had 24 hours, I would take every possible law that's on the books that makes it harder for business owners to do business, it makes it harder for parents to be great parents, makes it harder for teachers to teach what they really need to be teaching in school, makes it harder for money to flow from business to business or state to state, makes it harder for people in terms of taxation. I would just take it all off the books. And if I could completely abolish the IRS in a day, I would also do that. So is that 24 hours? Is that
that's
that work?
pretty productive, 24
Yeah.
hours. I had a chance to meet with President Reagan shortly after he left office. And what he said,
Oh.
we congratulated, we thanked him, and what he said was, he said, all we tried to do was get government the hell out of the
Yeah.
way so that you people could make America good.
Yeah. Yeah, he was the one who said government doesn't solve the problem, government is the problem.
Yeah.
I forgot there's one other thing. I would take I would do a belly flop in the White House pool.
Okay.
That would be
There's your 24 hours.
That would be like the very last minute.
Okay.
So and then they'd probably kick me out because my day would be over.
Yeah,
So.
you're king. You can do what you want.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that question.
Yeah. Ed, this is a terrific book. I took it home, and it was taken from me immediately
Your wife
by
stole
my
it.
wife. Yes, and she started reading it. Can you give us a quick synopsis of the book and where our viewers could find it?
Yeah, it better be quick because the book is about getting things done fast. So the book is based on my theory that short sprints and bursts create great change in your life. And so in the book, I outline a process called the 21-Day Miracle, where anyone can take any issue in their life or their business and make significant changes in 3 weeks or less. So I talk about money and mindset, becoming an inner warrior. I talk about health and fitness and relationships and happiness and basically any topic that you want to cover. I've had people do this for golf. I've had people do this to get more leads in their business. And it's designed to be a fast read, pretty quick. In fact, you really only need to read the first half of the book. And in fact, you only really need to read the first 4 sentences of the book, and that'll get you at least started down the road. And it's designed to help you get things done fast so that you can live your life, accomplish your purpose, and help as many people as you can.
That's great. I heard it's the #1 bestseller in India.
It was for 3 straight weeks. It was the number
21
one book.
days.
Yeah, for 21 days, it was the #1 book in India, the #1 of all books. It was at one point the #1 business book on Amazon. Sold nearly 20,000 copies at the time of this interview. So it's a blast, and you can find this book. By the way, you can find it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The quick link for it is, I have a really short link. It's www.edrushbook.com. So Ed Rush Book, which is literally the easiest website to remember. And when they get there, you not only can you get the book, but you also can get free access to a series of training videos that I created for the book. So a lot of fun.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
man.
All right. God bless
Yes,
you.
sir.